Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Southern Sorcery. Today, we are looking at the brand new Precon, The Blame Game, from the set Murders at Karlov Manor. This is a red, white, or Boros Precon, and has the commander Nelly Borca, Impulsive Accuser. She is 2 red and a white for a 2/4 human detective with vigilance. So not crazy overwhelming stats there, but let's check out what her abilities do. Whenever Nelly, Impulsive Accuser, attacks, suspect target creature, then goad all suspected creatures. So you're going to pick a target creature, you're going to suspect that creature, and then any creatures you have suspected become goaded, which means that they have to attack, but not you if able. Then she has a second clause that says, whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls deals combat damage to one or more of your opponents, you and that creature's controller each draw a card. So it incentivizes your opponents to attack each other, and then that way you get to draw a card and they get to draw a card. So kind of a little bit of a group hug. An interesting spin on GOAD. So with no further ado, let's check out the rest of the brand new cards that are coming out in this set, starting with our secondary commander. Okay, so first up under our new cards, we have the alternate commander for this deck, which is Feather Radiant Arbiter. It is a 4/3 angel for red, white, white with flying and lifelink, so pretty good there. And then whenever you cast a non-creature spell that targets only Feather Radiant Arbiter, you may choose any number of creatures that spell could target and pay 2 for each of those creatures. If you do for each of those creatures, copy that spell. So potentially you could have an enchantment that you wanted, and then you could copy that enchantment and put it on your other permanents. At the same time, there are some goad enchantments that you could potentially goad your own creature with, and then goad other people's creatures with for 2. You know, your own creature being goaded isn't that big of a deal, plus she's a flyer, so having to attack every turn wouldn't be the worst thing for this card anyway, but just kind of an interesting way to spread some love around the table. Next up, we have Havoc Eater. It is an elemental 3/3 for 5 and 2 red that has flying, and whenever Havoc Eater enters the battlefield, for each opponent, goad up to 1 target creature that opponent controls. Put X +1/+1 counters on Havoc Eater, where X is the total power of creatures goaded this way. So yeah, you can make this thing super huge, super fast. Next up, we've got Hot Pursuit, which is an enchantment for 1 and a red, and it says when Hot Pursuit enters the battlefield, suspect target creature an opponent controls. As long as Hot Pursuit remains on the battlefield, that creature is also goaded. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if 2 or more players have lost the game, gain control of all goaded and or suspected creatures until end of turn. Untap them, they gain haste until the end of turn. So one of the biggest problems with goad as a mechanic in the past has been that in Commander, it's kind of effective in the early and mid game, but in late game, when it gets down to 1 opponent, goad doesn't really matter because they can only now swing at you and they still have to swing. So goad was essentially pointless in the late game, and this now gives a payoff for goad. After it's 1v1, you gain control of any of the goaded creatures, so you just take all their stuff and untap it, and then it gets haste, so then you can swing at them with all their stuff and they will potentially have an empty field and you can just swing through to get the W that way. Next up, we have Immortal Obligation. It is an instant for 1 and a white. It says return target creature card from an opponent's graveyard to the battlefield under their control with a duty counter on it. For as long as that creature has a duty counter on it, it is goaded, can't attack you or permanents you control, and can't block other creatures you control. So this kind of gives you some protection from recursion decks that want to put big stuff in their graveyard and then throw it out onto the battlefield. You can at least target something in their graveyards that you really don't want coming at you. The thing they recur will still recur because you're recurring it for them, but it has that duty counter on it, can't attack you or a permanent you control, can't block creatures you control, and is goaded, so it's going to send it in someone else's direction. Next up, we've got Mob Verdict. This is our first voting card. I think there's a couple in here. This one is a sorcery for 2 red, and it says Secret Council. Each player secretly votes for another player. Then those votes are revealed. For each vote an opponent received, Mob Verdict deals 2 damage to that player and to each creature that player controls. For each vote you received, draw a card. So either you're going to draw a bunch of cards, or you're going to deal some damage to all the players, or if there's someone who's a threat, you guys, you could, I mean, it is a secret vote, obviously, but there is a certain amount of politicking in Commander, so potentially this could deal with a threat and become a board wipe for someone who has a massive board state. And that worst case scenario, you're going to draw some cards. Next up, we've got Otherworldly Escort. It is a human detective, 4/3 for 3 generic, 1 white with flash. And it says when Otherworldly Escort dies, if it's not a spirit, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with 4 charge counters on it. It's a spirit detective. It is no longer a human. And then you can pay 1 and a white, tap it, remove a charge counter from Otherworldly Escort, and destroy target creature that dealt damage to you this turn. So just kind of deters people from attacking you, and it's a 4/3, so it's a pretty big body, and it can come in at flash speed. So you could flash it in, block with it, something big, let it die. It comes back as a spirit detective with the charge counters on it, and then you can pay that 1 and a white and destroy a target creature that dealt damage to you this turn. So gives you a little bit of, hey, don't attack me, or I might just blow up the thing you attacked me with. Next, we have Prisoner's Dilemma. This is another voting card, sorcery for 3 and 2 red, and it says each opponent secretly chooses Silence or Snitch. Then the choices are revealed. If each opponent chose Silence, Prisoner's Dilemma deals 4 damage to each of them. If each opponent chose Snitch, Prisoner's Dilemma deals 8 damage to each of them. Otherwise, Prisoner's Dilemma deals 12 damage to each opponent who chose Silence. So you've got 2 options, Silence or Snitch. If everyone picks Silence, it deals 4 damage. If each opponent chooses Snitch, it deals 8 damage. Otherwise, it deals 12. And then you can flash it back for 7. So potentially, this could go one of a few ways. So it's a way to just deal out a ton of damage. It's kind of a wacky card. Next, we have Redemption Arc. It is an enchantment aura for 2 and a white to enchant creature. Enchanted creature has indestructible and is goaded. Then you can also pay 1 and a white to exile the enchanted creature. Next, we have Take the Bait. It is an instant for 2 red and a white. This is kind of one of those gotcha cards. It says cast the spell only during an opponent's turn and only during combat. So you can't play it on your own turn. But it says prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you and planeswalkers you control this turn. Untap all attacking creatures and goad them. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So there are a few other cards kind of like this out there. They don't have the restriction of only being able to be cast during an opponent's turn. They pretty much do the same thing, where you untap all attacking creatures and goad them, and there's an additional combat phase after that phase. But still, a little trickery there. Potentially, if it's down to you and that one other person, this would be a finisher for you. Pretty cool little card there. Next up, we've got Trouble in Pairs. This is an enchantment for 2 white. If an opponent would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead. So a little bit of hate for extra turn decks. And then whenever an opponent attacks you with 2 or more creatures, draws their second card each turn, or casts their second spell each turn, you draw a card. So Rhystic Study for white without the super annoying, do you pay the 1? You pay. It's not a pay. It's just when this happens, you draw a card. So there's no option for the players to pay to counter the ability. It just happens. So anytime they attack you with 2 or more creatures, draw their second card or cast their second spell each turn. So yeah, I mean, you're potentially drawing up to 3 cards a turn if an opponent swings at you with 2 or more creatures, draws 2 cards, or plays 2 spells. So up to 3 cards a turn, that's pretty, I mean, that's crazy. I feel like this is going to be a really great card. This is going to be a really expensive card eventually. We will see what happens with it, but yeah, it's a great alternative to Rhystic Study. And then our last card for the new cards is going to be Ransom Note. This is an artifact clue for 1 generic mana. All 4 of the precons have this one card in them. And it says, when Ransom Note enters the battlefield, surveil 1. So we've got a precon that does surveil. So that mechanic is there. And then you can pay 2, sacrifice Ransom Note, and then you choose one of the following. You can cloak the top card of your library, and cloak is a new mechanic to this set, and cloak means you take the top card of your library, you put it face down, it becomes a 2/2 creature that has ward 2. So then you can at a later time pay the casting cost of a creature card if it's a creature card, and you can flip it over. Otherwise you can't flip it. And if it dies, it just goes to the graveyard like normal. Then the second option is GOAD target creature, and there's a GOAD precon. And then the third is draw a card, and there is a card draw precon. So it's an interesting artifact that kind of is all inclusive. It comes in each of the 4 precons, and it is a brand new card specific to this set. So pretty cool that they did that. All right, now we are going to be checking out the reprints in this deck. We're just going to run those down pretty quick, as you guys have most likely seen these before. First, we've got Agitator Ant. Beginning of your upkeep, you can put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature you control. Your opponents can also do that. And then goad each creature that had counters put on it this way. So for yourself, you can buff up something, and then of course your opponent's creatures are goaded, so they just get bigger, but then they can't attack you until the goad wears off. Next, we've got Ancient Stone Idol. It is 10 colorless for a golem artifact creature, has flash, and this spell costs 1 less for each attacking creature. It is a 12/12 with trample, so it's huge, and then whenever it dies, you make a 6/12 colorless construct artifact creature with trample. So it comes out as a 12/12, then someone kills it, and it becomes a 6/12 token, still with trample. Next, we've got Angel of Ruins. It is a 5/7 flyer for 5 and 2 white. So a little bit expensive, but it says when it enters the battlefield, exile up to 2 target artifacts or enchantments. And then it also has plane cycling for 2. So you can pay 2 and then go get a planes, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. Next, we've got Anya, Merciless Angel. It is a 4/4 flyer for 3 red and a white. It says Anya, Merciless Angel gets +3/+3 for each opponent whose life total is less than half their starting life total. So in Commander, if they've got 20 or less, it gets +3/+3, so it becomes a 7/7 flyer. As long as an opponent's life total is less than half his or her starting life total, Anya has Indestructible, so also gets Indestructible. Next, we've got Boros Reckoner. Whenever it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target, and then you can pay a white or a red to have it gain first strike until end of turn. Brash Taunter, a goblin, is a 1/1 for 4 and a red that has Indestructible, and whenever Brash Taunter is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. Then we have Darien, King of, I don't know, I'm going to butcher this, Kjeldor? I don't know, KJ. It's a little hard of a sound. Kjeldor, whatever. Whenever you're dealt damage, you may put that many 1/1 white soldier tokens into play. So gets your board flooded a little bit there. Next, we have Atali, Primal Storm. Good old Atali. 4 red for a 6/6, and whenever it attacks, you exile the top card of each player's library. You may then cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana cost. Great card. I'm not sure what it's doing in this deck, but it's a great card. Next up, we have Fiendish Duo. It has first strike. It is a 5/5. If a source would deal damage to an opponent, it deals double that damage to that player instead. So a damage doubler. That's pretty good. Next, we have Frontier Warmonger, a human warrior 4/4. Whenever 1 or more creatures attack 1 or more of your opponents or planeswalker they control, those creatures gain menace until the end of turn. So another incentivizer to attack someone, not you. Gazella, Blade of Gold Knight, a angel for 4/1 red and 2 white for a 5/5 flyer with first strike. If a source would deal damage to an opponent or permanent an opponent controls, that source deals double that damage. So another damage doubler. If a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent half of that damage rounded up. So a damage doubler to your opponents, a damage reducer for yourself. Next, we've got Kazul, Tyrant of the Cliffs, a Ogre Warrior for 3 red is a 5/4. Whenever a creature an opponent controls attacks, if you're the defending player, make a 3/3 red Ogre creature token unless that controller pays 3. Keeper of the Accord, a 3/4. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more creatures than you, make a 1/1 white soldier creature token. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more lands than you, you may search your library for a basic plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So, I mean, it helps you keep up creature-wise and helps you keep up land-wise, so pretty good. Next is Lauren of the Third Path, a human with vigilance. When she enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment, and then you can tap her to draw a card, and then you choose an opponent, and they also draw a card. Orzhov Advocist is a 1/4 human advisor for 2 and a white. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature they control. If a player does, creatures that player controls can't attack you or planeswalkers you control until your next turn. So it buys you some time and gives you some politics. Selfless Squire, 3 and a white for a 1/1 human with flash. When Selfless Squire enters the battlefield, prevent all damage that would be dealt to you this turn. Whenever damage that would be dealt to you is prevented, put that many +1/+1 counters on a Selfless Squire. So yeah, you can make this thing really big depending on how big the stuff is that's swinging at you. Next, we have Solemn Simulacrum, a golem, a 2/2 for 4, colorless. When it enters a battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land and put that onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. And then whenever it dies, you can draw a card. Stalking Leonin is a 3/3 cat archer. When it enters the battlefield, secretly choose an opponent. Reveal that player you chose. Exile target creature that's attacking you if it's controlled by the chosen player. Activate this ability only once. Steel Hellkite is a 5/5 flyer for 6 colorless. It has pay 2. Steel Hellkite gets +1/+0 until the end of turn, and then it has an X. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. Activate only once per turn. So some removal built into it there. We have Sun Titan, a 6/6 giant for 4 white that has vigilance. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Vengeful Ancestor is a spirit dragon. It's 2 red for 3/4 with flying. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, goad a target creature. Whenever a goaded creature attacks, it deals 1 damage to its controller. So great goad payoff. Next is Wall of Omens. It's a 0/4 wall for 1 and a white. It has defender. When Wall of Omens enter the battlefield, draw a card. So just a cantrip there. And then we have Windborn Muse to round out our creatures. 3 and a white is a flyer. It's a 2/3, and it says creatures can't attack you unless its controller pays 2 for each creature they control that's attacking you. So that's called some pillow fort. Next up, we have Sorceries. Our first sorcery is Disrupt Decorum, classic in the Goad deck. It is 2 red. Goad all creatures you don't control. Next we have Promise of Loyalty. It is 4 and a white. Each player puts a vow counter on a creature they control and sacrifices the rest. Each of those creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control for as long as it has a vow counter on it. So a pretty much one-sided board wipe. I mean, the one creature they choose still stays, but it can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless they have a way to remove counters. A little blink or something, yeah, whatever. Next, we have Savine's Reclamation for 2 and a white. It says return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, you may copy the spell and choose a new target for the copy, and then you can flash it back for 4 and a white. Next, we have Spectacular Showdown, 1 and a red. Put a double strike counter on target creature, then goad each creature that had a double strike counter put on it this way, and you can overload it for 4 and a 3 red. This is a good way to have the competition kill themselves on your behalf. Next, we've got Winds of Wrath. It is 3 white and says destroy all creatures that aren't enchanted. They can't be regenerated. There are quite a few enchantments in this deck. We will move on to those momentarily, but this can be a one-sided board wipe as well. Moving on to our instants, we've got 3 instants. The first one is Comeuppance. It prevents all damage that would be dealt to you and planeswalkers you control this turn by sources you don't control. If damage from a creature source is prevented this way, Comeuppance deals that much damage to that creature. If damage from a non-creature source is prevented this way, Comeuppance deals that much damage to the source's controller. So good way to avoid some big damage coming your way. Next we have Deflecting Palm, 1 red, 1 white. The next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage. If damage is prevented this way, Deflecting Palm deals that much damage to that source's controller. So similar to Comeuppance. And then we have 1 white for Gideon's Sacrifice. Choose a creature or planeswalker you control. All damage that would be dealt this turn to you and permanents you control is dealt to the chosen permanent instead, if it's still on the battlefield. So it's just another way to, use something like Brash Taunter to deal a whole bunch of damage to somebody else. Next up, we have artifacts. Here we've got the usual suspects in the form of mana artifacts. We've got Soul Ring, we've got Arcane Signet, we've got Felwar Stone, we've got Mind Stone, we have the Talisman of Conviction, and we've got Thought Vessel. So all of those are very good. They're in every precon. And then we also have Bloodthirsty Blade, which is an artifact equipment, and it says the equipped creature gets +2/+0 and is goaded. And then you can pay 1 and attach Bloodthirsty Blade to a target creature an opponent controls. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery, so only on your turn in your main phases. And our other artifact is Tome of Legends. This enters the battlefield with a page counter on it. Whenever your commander enters the battlefield or attacks, put a page counter on Tome of Legends, and then you can pay 1 to remove a counter from Tome of Legends to draw a card. So just a little bit of a card draw artifact there for you. Okay, like I said, we have some enchantments here. Most of them are auras, so let's check these out. First is Curse of Opulence. It is an aura not for your creatures, but for your opponents. Enchant a player. When the enchanted players attack, make a gold token. Each opponent attacking that player does the same. So you enchant/curse an opponent, and then anytime one of the other opponents attacks that player, you and that person both make a gold token. Next, we have Duelist Heritage. It is an enchantment that says whenever 1 or more creatures attack, you may have target attacking creature gain double strike until the end of turn. So with all of your opponents' goaded creatures attacking each other, you can then grant any of them double strike. So that's good in this. Next, we've got Ghostly Prison. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each attacking creature. We have Martial Impetus. It is an aura. Enchant a creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and is goaded. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, each other creature that's attacking one of your opponents gets +1/+1 until the end of turn. Rite of the Raging Storm is an enchantment that says creatures named Lightning Rager can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. So very specific. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player puts a 5/1 red elemental creature token named Lightning Rager onto the battlefield. It has trample, haste, and at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this creature. So you're giving each player a 5/1 elemental creature. It has trample and haste, and you have to sack it at the end of your turn. Seal of Cleansing is 1 and a white, and it says sacrifice Seal of Cleansing, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Next, we have Shiny Impetus. It is an aura. It's an enchantment for creature. It gets +2/+2 and is goaded. Whenever the enchanted creature attacks, you create a treasure token. So a way to get some ramp. Next, we have Smuggler's Share. It's an enchantment that says at the beginning of each end step, draw a card for each opponent who drew 2 or more cards this turn. Then create a treasure token for each opponent who had 2 or more lands enter the battlefield under their control this turn. Next, we have Soul Snare. It is 1, and then you pay 1 to sacrifice it, exile target creature that's attacking you or a planeswalker you control. So you just have it sitting out, waiting for someone to swing at you, and then you can destroy something. Vow of Duty, 2 and a white for an aura that says enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2, has vigilance, and can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. Vow of Lightning is an enchantment aura. Enchant creature gets +2/+2, has first strike, and can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. So most of these are all ways to further incentivize your opponents to attack each other instead of you. Lastly, we have our lands. We've got 7 plains, 9 mountains, and then our specialty lands. We're going to run through these quickly. We have Access Tunnel, Ash Barrens, Boros Garrison, Castle Ardenvale, Command Tower, Escape Tunnel, Exotic Orchard, Fury Calm Snarl, Cur Keep, Labyrinth of Scophos, Myriad Landscape, Needle Spires, Reliquary Tower, Rogue's Passage, Scavenger Grounds, Slayer's Stronghold, Sunhome Fortress of the Legion, Temple of Triumph, Temple of the False God, Throne of the High City, and War Room. That rounds out our Precon. You can kind of see what it wants to do. There's definitely some things you're going to want to take out. There's definitely some things you're going to want to put in. And stay tuned for that, because that is where we are moving to next. Next up is our Deck Tech $50 upgrade, and we will start out with what we're removing, and then we will talk about what we are going to put in. All right, we are on to everyone's favorite part, and the reason that you're probably here, the $50 budget upgrade for this deck. So first off, we will start with our removals. Cards that we have cut to make room for cards we think are better to fit within that $50 budget. If you've ever done a Precon upgrade before, you know that the worst part is the land base. What is a deck without the right mana base? So we have cut all of the tapped lands, and this deck was kind of weird in that it came with 13 lands out of the 37 that tapped for colorless. They did have, some of them did have like secondary functions, pay 4 mana to give target creature double strike, pay 4 mana to, this, that, or the other. And while that is nice for functionality, you're probably never going to use it, and we took a lot of that stuff out. So outside of the lands, we have also cut our Planeswalker, Elspeth, Sun's Champion. She's useful in this deck. There's just other things that synergize a little bit better than this. Also cut Etali, a fantastic card. Lets you play the cards off of other people's decks. It's a 6-drop, then you gotta wait a turn. Everyone knows what Etali is. It's a pretty big threat. Also, there's no real synergy in this deck for casting cards from exile or playing other people's cards. We can do that a little bit better with some other stuff, as you're gonna see. We also got rid of Steel Hellkite. That is the colorless artifact dragon. Doesn't really do much in this deck. We also got rid of the Ancient Stone Idol. That is the big 12/12. Cast 1 less for each attacking creature. Yeah, you could probably get it for less than 10, but that's, in your opening hand, that's really tough. Winds of Wrath is another cut, which is the board wipe for creatures that aren't enchanted. You don't really want a board wipe, and if we are going to board wipe, most of the enchantments in this deck are stuff to enchant your opponent's creatures with, so then they're going to retain those creatures. You're going to kill all of your own stuff. Kind of just doesn't really make much sense. We've got Deflecting Palm, getting rid of Promise of Loyalty. We're going to get rid of Windborn Muse and Ghostly Prison. Those are the 2 that you have to pay to for each attacking creature. Stuff should be goaded. It shouldn't be swinging at you anyway. And we've also gotten rid of Sun Titan. It's a good card. It's just, again, we don't have a lot of recursion synergies. It costs 6. It's very, very slow in the early game, and it doesn't recur anything. It only recurs creatures less 3 or less. And then we also got rid of Gideon's Sacrifice. That is a 1 instant that all damage would be dealt to you this turn is dealt to a target creature you control instead. Maybe that would save you, but there's just better cards out there that are a little more all-encompassing than Gideon's Sacrifice. So those are all the cards that we're going to be removing. If you like this content, please consider liking this video and subscribing. Again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. We're a relatively new channel, so we appreciate it very, very much. Thank you, thank you. Now to everyone's favorite part, we have the additions to our deck. All right, our first couple of additions are going to be some protection for our commander. There's not really anything in the deck to really give her an advantage, so we are going to add Lightning Greaves, and in the same vein, we are also going to add Swiftfoot Boots. These are both fantastic cards. They offer some protection for your commander. Your commander really is the engine for this deck, so you really need these. We also have added Flawless Maneuver, gives all of your creatures indestructible. We also have Unbreakable Formation, gives your creatures indestructible. And if you cast it in your main phase, you get to put +1/+1 counters on all of your creatures, and they gain vigilance till the end of turn. So if you're swinging out and you need just that little bit of extra damage to get through, you can put the counters on all of your creatures, and then they get vigilance, so you would still have blockers. So if you cast that kind of in the later game. We also have added Boros Signet. We have added Curse of Hospitality. You enchant player, creatures attacking the enchanted player have trample, and then whenever a creature deals combat damage to the enchanted player, that player exiles the top card of their library. Until the end of turn, that creature's controller may play that card, and they may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. So just more incentive to attack somebody else. We also have Taunt from the Rampart. This is a really cool goad card from Lord of the Rings. Goad all creatures your opponents control until your next turn. Those creatures can't block. So pretty good. You can cast this for your attack phase. Nothing can block, and then you have an entire turn before anything can attack you again. So very good in this deck. We also added Baloth Baratal Entertainer. It is an elf shaman. It says creatures your opponents control with power less than Baloth Baratal's power are goaded. Whenever a goaded attacking or blocking creature dies, you make a treasure token. Next, we have Mother of Runes, another way to potentially protect your commander or another creature if that's something that you need in that moment. But we just have her in here just to offer a little bit more ability to try to keep your commander around a little bit longer. We also added Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. We are in white. There's no reason not to have these in here. There's virtually no spot removal in this Precon. We have also added Wrath of God as a board wipe, a much better board wipe, and it is one less than the existing board wipe that was in here. It's a classic. We have also added a Blasphemous Act, another great board wipe for red. You can essentially cast it for 1 red potentially, depending on how many creatures are on the board. Again, we don't really want to board wipe in this deck. We want people's stuff out and attacking each other, but in case that for some reason, if there was, hey, somebody's got to answer this before the next turn, or somebody else is going to win, that's when you cast your board wipe. You don't want that to be the case. That is more of a, hey, bail you out of a situation. We'd rather run protection for our stuff and just keep trucking with our game plan. We do have a few new cards from the set that is just coming out that fit great in this deck. First, we have Agris Kos, Spirit of Justice. He is a 2/4 Spirit Detective for 2 red/white. He has double strike and vigilance. Whenever Agris enters the battlefield or attacks, choose up to 1 target creature. If it is suspected, exile it. Otherwise, suspect it. So this gives you a little bit more of the suspect, but it's also some spot removal on a creature that has double strike and vigilance. So very good. Great card from the murderers at Karlov Manor. Always like to include a couple cards from the new set that aren't in the precons, and that one works really well. The other one is Aurelia, the Law Above. She is a 4/4 angel for 3 red and a white that has flying, vigilance, and haste. Whenever a player attacks with 3 or more creatures, you draw a card. Whenever a player attacks with 5 or more creatures, Aurelia, the Law Above, deals 3 damage to each of your opponents, and you gain 3 life. So you've got a whole board state. Everything's goaded. You should be able to reap the benefits of this card pretty much immediately. So that's another great card, especially in this deck. And then we added in some lands. We added in Spectator Seating, Clifftop Retreat, Sundown Pass, and Rugged Prairie. And then we up the basics a little bit to round that out. A lot of the time, I'd rather just have basics than some of these terrible, terrible utility lands. So thank you guys again so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We've got lots of content like this. Check us out. We're on all the social medias, and have a great day. Bye.